If you're navigating a job search or career pivot, there's a new resource you must know about. Wanted, a board career by executive coach Marlo Lyons, reveals how board service can strengthen your leadership brand and open doors your resume never will. It's a practical, step-by-step guide for professionals ready to think differently about what's next. The book is available now. Check the show notes to learn more.
People often say, they try to think themselves calm. They cannot.
Can't do that.
It is impossible because your emotional brain, the limbic system, was designed to get first dibs. It's designed to keep you safe. It's always going to be hyper alert. So you cannot think yourself calm. Once people understand that, then they can be open to, well, how can I calm myself down? You've always been this way. Let's see what we can do about it. It's slow, but because this person or this thought or this situation has always triggered you, it doesn't always have to.
Let me ask you something. It's the beginning of Q2. How are you feeling? Are you already stressed? Overwhelmed? Running from meeting to meeting, trying to keep up with everything coming at you? Because what I see all the time, especially with high performers, is this pattern of people who are doing incredibly well on paper, but underneath it all, they're exhausted, reactive, and running on fumes. Often, they don't even realize how far they've gone until something forces them to stop. My guest today is Margo Boster, coach and author of Mindfully Successful. She brings such a powerful perspective on what's really happening in our brains and bodies when we're under constant stress, and more importantly, what we can actually do about it. We talk about how to recognize when you're crossing that line, how to regulate your reactions in real time, and how simple practices can completely change how you show up at work and in your life. If you've ever been feeling like you're constantly on, this episode is for you. Let's get unscripted with Margo. Margo, welcome to Work Unscripted.
Oh, thank you, Marlo. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Well, I am so excited to have you here because I feel like you are the epitome of every human out there. So, and in your career trajectory. And so from the outside, I know just by talking to you and meeting you and most people I think would say that you are incredibly successful. That's what they would say. But also when I was reading your book, and we'll talk about that in a second, but there was a point in your life where you called yourself successfully exhausted.
Yeah.
So what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I would say that I was probably successfully exhausted most of my career because I was working so hard at what I had defined as success. And a lot of that was based on other people's perceptions. If I got praise that day, if I didn't, what were the positions? What were the titles? What was the money? And I was always working so hard to meet this definition that I could never quite achieve. It was never quite enough. And I remember one particular which day that really encapsulates it. It was 5:00 in the morning. I'm standing in my bathroom. I had a calendar, a paper calendar hanging in the bathroom. So I would be able to look and see, where am I going today? And because I traveled a lot, and I was standing there looking, my husband and kids were asleep. I was exhausted. I left them notes and crept out of the house before 6 a.m. And that really does it's the image of that successfully exhausted. And I was that state for a large portion of my life. Was it enough? Did they say I was successful?
How often do you see this in leaders that you work with today?
All the time. And what's interesting is that I work primarily with senior leaders, executives. Mm-hmm. And so the people I work with are all successful and smart, accomplished. And what surprised me and what led me to writing the book actually was the realization that this feeling is so prevalent. No matter what they look like on the outside. And I mean, I coach some pretty impressive people. what they look like on the outside, there's still that tiredness. I can't sleep, that self-doubt, that beating themselves up. And it is an epidemic in the Western world of being successfully exhausted.
What are those invisible costs? I mean, you're working with leaders, they're performing success, they seemingly are successful. There is a cost to that though.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's a cost to the individual, the leader, and there's a cost to their team and the organization. And the cost to the individual is that real physical toll. It is going to show up.
Mhm.
It is, the most obvious thing seems to be the heart attack or the stroke, but it shows up in so many ways. The not sleeping, the not feeling well, the not being at peak performance, not being near peak performance. But for the organization and the others, it also is showing up because if you think about it, they're also dealing with their successfully exhausted state, trying to meet the needs of this successfully exhausted leader. And so the team is not performing well. The organization will have an impact. There may be short-term meeting the goals, but is it long-term and sustainable?
I think a lot of leaders, don't they, a lot of them say, well, I'm just really high achieving, or I'm really high functioning, or I just keep going. That's who I am. That's who I am as a human. But there's a difference between high achieving and high functioning.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one thing is a lot of people wear that stress, that burden as a badge of honor. Look at me. Look how strong I am. And they also often worry if it looks too easy, no one's going to respect what I'm doing. If I'm not walking in here frantic, they're not going to notice how good I am at achieving it. But the difference in high achieving and high functioning, high achieving is we achieve things. There were outcomes that you could see. Something shifted, something changed. High functioning is activity. And there's really a couple of different ways we can talk about high functioning. One is where they're very performative, they are working hard, and they are doing a lot of activities. Another is that there's also the over-functioning, is what it's called, is where they are working to make certain that they are taking care of not just themselves, but the others. And so high functioning is a survival. It's a coping mechanism. I live with a lot of people with ADHD, my husband, my son, my grandson. And
Me too.
and a lot of the times, these people, in order to be successful, have learned to be high functioning, which is positive, but is it always high achieving? And so I think they're both important, but there's a huge difference in what we're doing. Is it the outcome you want or just having activity?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think, when you're working with executives, and I love this book. I have to, first of all, just point out the book. It's Mindfully Successful. It is not only a great title, like phenomenal title, but it's a great book. And I think everybody should buy it. And what's so amazing about it is you've taken like yoga and mindfulness and breath work and all of these different things and put it together, and how it all works together. Like you have to do it all for it all to work well together. Who did you write this for? Who'd you write this for?
It's, if I could give just a little bit of a longer story than a short one. When I completed yoga teacher training, which was a year-long wonderful experience with great teachers. And right after that, I went to Georgetown coaching training. And the intersections of those two were so parallel. It was, there is no one right answer, how noticing and slowing down and awareness. And then I thought, oh my gosh, there's got to be a way that I can integrate this. But I had that self-doubt. Just because I thought it was a great idea, who else was going to think it? If it was so great, someone would have already done it. Well, as I started working with my leaders, and it was those senior executives, In private sector, it was the C-suites. In public sector, it was the senior executives and military generals. These are high impact people. And as I began to notice that they were experiencing the same thing that I had, and I had a tool that could help them. And so I started slowly integrating it over and over. Just with this client, I noticed this would work, or this one, this might be beneficial. And over a period of time, I realized this is not just a one-off. So I really wrote this book for those high achievers, for those accomplished, they knew how to do all this stuff, but they needed the inner work. But if I may add, after it was published, my daughter, my adult daughter, who's in a similar field, said, "You know what? You need to bring this to those newer managers, those newer leaders." So I'm going to do a little promotion for we created a workbook.
Oh, that's
It's
great.
not your normal everyday write a lot. It's a fascinating workbook that tells people how to take the ideas from the book and work through it. And then in the book, in the integration chapter, I tell the story of Chris. Everybody in the book is a legitimate person. I changed their names,
of course,
and changed that. But I talked with Chris. He calls me after the book comes out, and he goes, and talked to me, "Well, Margo, I loved your book. That was so great. But I have to tell you, that Chris guy was a little suspect."
And you were talking about him.
He knew what he was doing. I said, "Did he sound a little familiar?" And he was like, "Yeah." But anyway, he said, "You know who needs this book are those new managers, those new leaders." And so I wrote it for those executives. But I'm also hearing it resonates with those newer leaders who are also trying to figure out how to do. If they can begin implementing some of the being as they're learning how to do, they're going to have a much more mindfully successful
And that
career.
makes sense, because if you think about it, when you're moving into a manager role, right? You got that role because you were a successful IC, independent contributor, right? You were phenomenal. You became an expert, whatever it is. You were great at what you did. But when you manage, it's a whole different ballgame. And there's a difference between being calm and being present, shall we say, right? Being present with your team and making sure that they know that you are with it. You're in it with them, even though you are now managing them, and you do have to do less doing and do more being, which is being that present part.
And I think a lot of the times people, I love that example there, because a lot of times people confuse calm with present. But calm, in a way, is more inward focused. How am I feeling? And present is really about being with them, being there. Yeah.
Right. And
Great
so
distinction.
if someone is crushing it professionally, like they're doing great, but they're anxious or they're reactive or they're depleted, how do they know that they've really crossed that line into successfully exhausted, or if this is just a moment in time?
Yeah, and that's challenging, because a lot of the times they are going at such a pace that they just keep going. Unfortunately, it often takes hitting a wall, either not getting that promotion, not meeting their goals, or someone else pointing out to them. For me, honest to goodness, it was a head-on car collision. So,
Oh my gosh.
oh yeah.
Wow.
So we don't want people to get to those areas. Less extreme ways what I hear my clients saying is, "I am tired. I'm not sleeping. I know I'm short with people, and I don't know why." And so there becomes an internal awareness that it's taking a toll. And the not sleeping is one I often hear. I think that's often a good first indicator that pay attention.
And you've led me right into the book. So the book is about the brain, the body, the breath. And you were just talking about people not sleeping, or that they're being triggered, right? They're reacting in ways at work that they shouldn't be reacting, or they shouldn't be having a reaction at all, shall we say, whether it's through conflict or criticism or uncertainty or whatever they're dealing with. So how do we look at the brain specifically? And let's not get too technical. I think there's a lot of technicality in the book, which I think is phenomenal. But without getting too technical, give me the basics on how I can think about the brain in a way that would help me like refocus, not be so triggered, not be so reactive.
I think that the two most basic premises are about the impact of the emotion that, often referred to as the emotional brain and the thinking brain. People often say, they try to think themselves calm. They cannot.
Can't do that.
It is impossible because your emotional brain, the limbic system, was designed to get first dibs. It's designed to keep you safe. It's always going to be hyper alert. So you cannot think yourself calm. Once people understand that, then they can be open to, well, how can I calm myself down? Which takes us also to the next key thing, which is the neuroplasticity, the ability to change. You've always been this way. Let's see what we can do about it. It's slow. But because this person or this thought or this situation has always triggered you, it doesn't always have to. So those are the two primary things, the emotional and thinking brain and the ability to rewire through neuroplasticity.
And for those out there who are listening and are thinking, well, I've always been a high reactive person. I've always been triggered. I scream, I yell. I can promise you, as somebody who has done the work and done a lot of the work over the past 5 years, I have completely changed my response and completely changed the way I react to everything. And now it is, habit, right? It's exactly how my body reacts versus having to think about it. Right? Because there is a pattern shift. And can you, for me, I know it's worked, but maybe you've had a client that it's also worked for. Any examples per se?
I think one of the most telling clients is, I call him Henry in the book. Mm-hmm. And it's a situation where Henry, incredibly successful, if you ever saw this person, you would be perhaps intimidated by them. They were brilliant, successful, commanding. And yet they had an encounter with a former boss 4 years prior to I met them. And this former boss publicly berated them. And so since then, just the mere mention of that person's name would send Henry into this incredibly fight, flight, or freeze mode, reactive self-protection. If they even saw their name written somewhere, it was fascinating. And they were still in the same organization. And so we started using a technique called naming. And it is a technique where you're rewiring your brain so that whenever the boss's stimuli came in, instead of them immediately reacting to it, they were able to do a technique called naming, and they would attach a non-emotional word to that person. And over time, I worked with a leader about a year. Over time, at the end, they were surprised. They had to do a presentation, and it turned out this person was in the front row. They did their presentation. The person was there. They were talking with them afterwards. And in the middle of talking with them, they said it suddenly occurred to them there was no trigger, none. And so that is one of short term where this had only been going on for 4 years, but it was impacting them and their career. So there's other stories we could use that talk about how you can rewire the brain to not have that negative reaction, but give you the ability to observe and respond.
And I love the rewiring part because I feel like there's so many cliche little statements out there like, don't let them have free rent in your head, or, don't give away your power. That helps. That doesn't do anything, right? It does not help anyone. All it is making you feel bad when you have a reaction of, oh, I gave away my power. Oh, I'm, ruminating over somebody and I have free rent in my head. What's nice about this is you are actually rewiring, like truly rewiring through that neuroplasticity. And you have these 4 steps, right? It's noticing, which is your self-awareness that it's happening, right? That's the beginning. And then the naming part. Give me an example of naming. Like if I'm triggered by, say I'm triggered by a friend I no longer talk to, and sometimes that friend's name comes into my head. What do I do? How do I put a positive word to that?
And that's interesting because what you're doing is you're not trying to put a positive word to it. That is still an emotion that you're triggering.
Okay.
And this is based on a lot of work by Matthew Lieberman out of, I think, UCLA. And through functional MRIs, so they're noticing what's happening, they're registering what's happening in your brain. What naming does is, I'll use a personal example. There was a person who triggers me, okay, for whatever reason. They trigger me. So what I do is I assign a non-emotional word. When that emotion hits, I might just say
flower
or sofa.
Sofa, right? Because even flower could be like, oh, sweet smelling, it's like non-emotional. Like there's nothing about a sofa, right?
But what you're doing is that a reaction is if we think of our brain, let me see here. This is your limbic system.
Right.
And this is your outer brain. Okay. Your prefrontal.
Right.
And so what you're doing is if you're saying positive thoughts, what's happened is that emotion has come in that's just like, if you're thinking positive thoughts, you're still trying to finagle this.
You're trying to push it away.
So what you do is you're working with your prefrontal cortex, and you are saying, you're activating the prefrontal cortex is what you're doing. You're reducing the impact of the limbic system and activating this, so that over time, this prefrontal, the limbic system has less impact. I don't know if you've ever heard of EMDR. It's a method they use in therapies to help reduce the impact of that amygdala when you have triggering events.
Yeah.
So by naming it, you're activating the prefrontal cortex, reducing the impact of the emotion. So be careful. Don't do naming for positive emotions you want to keep. Okay. So if you're thinking, oh, I love this person, they're so kind, don't give them a word, because it's going to reduce that emotional impact.
Got it. Now, there's 2 more steps to this. There's scratch the record and meditation. Can you explain, what do you do after you've named it?
Yeah. So scratch the record is, if you think about the neurons take the path of least resistance. And that's why these habits and what are called the unconscious learning, they happened over time. You learned as a child, perhaps, that say if one of my clients grew up in an alcoholic family, and so what they learned was safety meant be distant and in control. And so when they would watch their parent come home at night, they would look out to see how they drove into the driveway. So what's happening in their brain is their constant rewiring is that I need to know, to be prepared for distant. What happened when this person became a leader, they were very in charge, and nobody liked them. Nobody liked working with them. The feedback that they got was about being distant and controlling.
Interesting.
And they said, this is not what I feel like inside. And so what we did was I often will use I'll use a pencil here, a physical thing, maybe I used to do a Yoda. And when you have that thought come through, you literally can put a physical stimuli, don't hurt yourself, but just physically do a stimuli as you're noticing it to physically stop it. So your brain is, instead of just going down that path of least resistance, which has gone for 40 years, you're stopping it and consciously saying, go a different way, and it takes time. It isn't a one and done.
Of course.
And so the scratch the record is in the moment, interruption, so that you're scratching what is the path of least resistance and enabling you to create a new path.
And people do feel this in their body right away. I always say to people, like my clients, I'm like, what did you feel in that moment in your body? Well, my shoulders got tense, or my stomach, started to, make noises, or I felt my hips start to hurt. Like they feel it. You feel when you're being triggered. You cannot say you're not. Everybody can feel it, and your body will feel it first before your brain even processes what's going on.
Absolutely.
So when that happens, what are leaders then unintentionally communicating through that tension and that posture, and that they're holding their breath and they're showing that control?
Yeah. What I found is that when they are tensing up and they're in that control moment, it makes the other people feel unsafe. And so it triggers it in them too. So if the person comes in a hurry, I used to think I had to walk in a hurry because look how important I am. I have so much to do. So when people come in and they're like that, let's get down to work. Immediately it triggers for the other people, even subconsciously or unconsciously, I'm not safe. So they will default to their protective mode, which may be, let me be super strong, let me withdraw, let me, whatever it may be. And so even though the leader may think, I've got this under control, the message that they're sending to others is that they are being in an unsafe position.
And that doesn't help anybody. So the last part of this is meditation. I'm going to be the first one to admit out loud, I can't meditate. ADHD, my brain's everywhere all the time. But you don't talk about it in traditional meditation where you're sitting there going, Om. You're really talking about poses. And these are poses which I think work better for somebody like me who likes to get up and move, right? And anybody likes to get up and move. But it's about using different poses to either feel like centered or confident or energized or even patient. So can you share like an example of a leader who you had them do a pose and, either before a big moment or before a stressful meeting or something like that, and what that did for them?
Yeah. I think about one that comes to mind is in the book, I think it's called Tadasana or mountain pose. And it's a very, very simple, but you're centered. And so you stand there, your feet are solid on the ground, and you begin to notice how you are from the ground up. The feet, the ankles, the calves, the knees, the thighs. Well, what's happening here is you're quietening down all that chatter. Okay. You're not saying, shut up, be quiet, I can't. You're just, because you're focusing on that, you're able to quiet the mind. So it is somewhat meditative. And then as you just move on up, and then, the shoulders, which are now your autonomic nervous system is receiving the message safe. And if you're aware, you begin breathing more slowly. And so combined with that simple pose of grounded, centered, you do tell your whole being it's safe and relax. And the meditation is interesting. I think I tell the story is I'm not ADHD, but I was a super A++ person. And when I first started meditating, I could not do it. I just could not do it. I mean, what a waste of
So
time.
hard, right?
Yeah. Oh, it was a waste. And this was back in the day when we had cassette tapes. Okay. And I found one that had like a 5, a 10, a 15, and a 30-minute meditation. And I sat on my floor with that 5-minute meditation. No exaggeration. I was like looking at my watch. How long is it?
That's not the whole point of meditation right there.
Yeah. And then I force myself. And there have been studies also that meditation helps people with ADHD. But I know it is more challenging for ADHD people to do the traditional meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So when I talk about meditation, it really is just trying slowly to notice, quiet the brain. Thoughts will come in because that's what your brain does. But the meditative piece is instead of letting that thought run away, you notice it and just place it aside.
And what's interesting about these poses and what I like about them is that you can do the meditation while you're posing. And I don't think
Yes.
people realize that we take 17,000 breaths a day. and each one of those, each breath that we take that we don't even know we're taking, like that's our opportunity to shift that nervous system and do that rewiring. And I think that's wild, by the way. But why is breath the quickest remote control we have for re-engaging that prefrontal cortex, having that emotional amygdala calm down, whether it's before a meeting, after we've been triggered, whatever it is we're dealing with in the moment at work?
Yeah. The breath is the only you can consciously control the breath. You cannot consciously control the rest of your autonomic nervous system. You cannot say heart rate slow down, heart rate slow down. You cannot say mind stop, mind stop. The more you say that, it has a counter effect. But you do have control over your breath. And your breath has a direct pathway to the autonomic nervous system, which controls the nervousness, the stomach, the neurons firing. And so the breath is the most direct route that you have control over to take a breath. And people don't often realize that breathing, your upper respiratory system was designed to be a backup mechanism. It was designed so when you were needing to run and escape the bears, that kicked in. So when you're breathing from your upper respiratory system, from your upper chest, that shallow breathing, you're sending a message to your brain, danger, 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 danger.
Oh, so that keeps you anxious and activated versus calm.
That keeps you, that's right. So I used to think that I breathed from my upper when I got nervous.
Mm-hmm.
I realized, no, breathing from my upper respiratory was causing me to be more nervous.
Mm.
So if you breathe from your diaphragmatic respiratory system, it's just sending that message to your body, we're okay, and your brain.
And I think you're right, Margo. I don't think leaders realize how critical this one little tool is. Like, this is so beyond critical. I have done box breathing, which is your 4 breaths in, hold for 4 counts, 4 breaths out, hold 4 counts, right? I have done that in less than a minute and have completely reset my mind and reset my anxiety, and everything has just come immediately down. And especially before a speech, like when I'm up on the stage or if I have a big meeting and I want to close a deal, whatever it is, I have done that. And I am a firm believer of this. and that's a simple one, right? Are there others that leaders should be aware of? I know there's a ton in the book, tons of kinds of breathing depending upon what you're looking to do. But give me another example.
Yeah, well, one thing I want to say about box breathing, one of the powers of box breathing is how simple it is. And that's why first responders, Navy SEALs, fighter pilots are taught this, because it is immediate and it has effect, and it's so easy. Another one that I really count on, and there's 2 others I'll talk about. One is what I call the 4-4-7. And the basics of breathing are, besides the upper and lower respiratory, is inhaling more than exhaling is invigorating. Exhaling more than inhaling is relaxing. Okay. So the 4-4-7 is inhale for 4, pause for 4, and exhale for 7.
Okay.
Inhale. And when people first start, they may not be able to do 4-4-7, 3-3-6. So inhale, pause, and exhale. And you can do this anytime you're in that meeting and you're wanting to lunge the table. You're starting to speak and you want to make certain that you are not reactive. 4-4-7 is one of my go-tos. another one that it's interesting. I really enjoyed it on the yoga mat, and I was hesitant actually to suggest it in the workforce because it looks a little odd. But I have heard, the incredible power of it is the alternative nostril breathing. And that one is, you have to put your fingers to your nose, which is why. So if you put your fingers to your nose and you inhale with both and then close one side and exhale. Now inhale and leave. Let's look your one finger. Let's do it with one hand. Watch me. Look at me here. Okay. Use these two fingers.
Mm-hmm.
So one here and one here.
Oh, got it.
Okay. So inhale. Close one side with your thumb. Exhale the other side. Inhale the other side. Release the thumb. Close that side and exhale. Inhale. Release and close and exhale. Inhale and then release and exhale.
That's incredible.
And you can really feel it
like instantly.
It really balances the brain. And I had one client who used this, and they later told me, because I'd said, they called me before a meeting. They were before a strategic session for their leadership team. They were really tense. And I said, try this one, but you probably don't want to do it during the meeting. Well, they tell me later, they said, you know what? I did. You just put your head down. Nobody knows what you're doing. And you just breathe away. And the more you practice, so those are, the box breathing is simple. The 4-4-7 is very calming. And it too, you can do it anytime. And the alternative nostril breathing requires a little more focus and practice. When you first start it doesn't feel real natural, but keep practicing it. And it is really, really powerful.
It is. If I'm a leader and we've covered like brain, body, breath. So if I'm a leader, where do I start? Like, how do I start to bring my stress down, not feel like I'm running 1,000 miles an hour, not feeling like I can't handle one more thing? What would you recommend as the first step?
The very first step is the awareness, is noticing in the awareness, and then that you have the intention to make a change. I tell my leaders to start with 3 to 6 minutes a day. Okay. Not while you're driving. People say, I do that while I'm driving. No. Let's say if you drive to the office, when you pull in, set your timer for 3 minutes and notice, close your eyes and breathe for 3 minutes. Just quietly, when things are coming through your mind, set them aside. So you are meditating. You are breathing, you're centering your whole body. 3 minutes a day. It will impact your day. I also encourage them at the end of the day, like if they're commuting home, when you pull in, give yourself 3 minutes and do this again. And it's a cumulative effect of you feel better in the moment, but it's also like when you're exercising any muscle. The more you exercise that muscle, the stronger it becomes. The more you exercise this calming yourself, your nervous system, the stronger it becomes, so you're not as reactive.
Is that what you do when you're spiraling or stressed? Is that like your immediate life reset?
My immediate now is I meditate daily. And it may be a 15-minute, my ideal is a 45-minute, but I meditate for 15 to 45 minutes every day to keep my baseline more calm instead of frantic. And yes, yesterday I was in a meeting, and I found myself reacting internally, like, oh, Jesus, don't you guys get it?
Oh, yeah, been there too many times.
And what I did, though, was I slowed down and counted to 10, noticing my breath. So a shortened version of the 3 minute, but and you can count to 10 on your hands, put your hands in your lap, and you're just and you let them finish talking and you're reset. So now you are able to respond instead of reacting. So a daily practice, 3 minutes in the morning and 3 in the evening, in the moment, slow down, count to 10, and you use your fingers so you're still engaging. And it calms you, resets you.
So that 3 minutes is all you need in the morning, in the evening. And I don't know there's anybody on the planet that doesn't have 3 minutes. It's 3 minutes. That's it. Like I think it's
all a matter
possible.
of how they're going to spend it. Are they going to spend that 3 minutes going and apologizing to somebody for biting their head off? Or are they going to spend that 3 minutes helping themselves show up as a more mindfully successful leader?
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Margo, where can people find you? Where can they find your work? Where can they find your book? The book is amazing, and it's not a very long book. You can read this book. You will learn so much. Yep. Where can they find you?
In the workbook. My website is Margo Boster, MargoBoster.com. And I have information there about my coaching, about Mindfully Successful. The book and the workbook are available there. And of course, they're both available on Amazon and wherever you buy your books.
Awesome.
And I want to say real quickly, the book is also available on audiobook because most of my leaders that I worked with were like, I don't have time to read. So I made certain to provide an audiobook for them. And I've heard from many of my leaders that they would listen to it on their way. And then they may buy the book also so they can look at it.
Yeah.
But it is available.
Perfect for a commute. Absolutely perfect for a commute.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being here, Margo. Amazing. I hope people will take it to heart and really think about how breathing can make such a difference, not only in your life, but your team's lives, your family's lives, everybody's lives around you who interact with you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Marlo. I so appreciate it.
What I hope you take away from this conversation is just because you can keep going doesn't mean you should. And just because you're performing well doesn't mean you're operating in a way that's sustainable. Being successfully exhausted is something so many high performers normalize, but it comes at a cost to your health, to your relationships, and to the people you're leading. But as we learned today, it doesn't require a massive overhaul to start shifting. It can start with something as simple as your breath and awareness. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who might need that reminder right now. And of course, don't forget to rate and review. As always, stay curious, stay growing, and stay unscripted. The journey is yours. Work Unscripted is produced and edited in partnership with the team at Palm Tree Podco and 21 Digby. The content for this week's episode was created by me, Marlo Lyons.